接下来，请允许我介绍下一位演讲嘉宾温思丽女士。温思丽，新加坡资讯通信媒体发展局 AI 治理与安全集群总监，新加坡人工智能安全研究所政策负责人。他负责推动新加坡 AI 治理与安全政策，建设可信 AI 生态，并促进国际合作。他在公共部门技术应用方面拥有丰富经验，长期致力于推动政府数字化转型、技术向善及女性在科技领域的发展。Now, let's give a round of applause to Ms. Lee.
各位下午好，今天非常荣幸能够在这里给大家介绍一下新加坡对于人工智能安全治理的一些想法和一些思考和做法。I'm going to speak in English now. It's just so much easier for me. Okay, I would like to talk a little bit about what we are thinking around international collaboration around AI safety and governance. But before I do that, maybe just a quick reminder that how Singapore thinks about AI governance is that we want to really be able to maximize the use of AI for the benefit of our economy and society. And in order to do that, we have to build trust with consumers, right? Make them feel safe. This will create an environment that will allow us to, innovate with AI. And there are three areas that I think we could collaborate internationally. I'll get into each of them in my presentation. First, in the area of research, how we can collectively advance the science of AI safety. Two, then, is in how we build up capacity in industry. Most of these, by industry, I mean enterprises, building and deploying AI systems, and how we can help them ensure that they do this in a safe and responsible way. And then finally, in how we could collectively develop global norms, as well as adhere to these global norms. So starting with research, I'll talk a little bit about the Singapore consensus. Sometime in April, we gathered a group of people. These are AI experts from both academia as well as industry and some from government, to come to look at what are some of the research priorities around AI safety, right? They came from many countries, China included, building on the work that's already been done in the International AI Safety Report, and deep dive into areas in which we could focus our efforts around AI safety research. The conference was very useful in developing and producing this document that we call the Singapore Consensus on Global AI Safety Research Priorities. It's called the Singapore Consensus, not because it's from Singapore, but it was just done in Singapore, so hence Singapore Consensus. And the idea is how can we raise awareness amongst governments as well as organizations around areas of AI safety concerns and where we should be setting our research agenda and developing partnerships. It's beyond just coming up with the document. I thought what was really useful from the event was the opportunity for people from around the world, experts, to gather in Singapore and exchange notes on what they're doing. These are technical experts. I think it created an environment where they could learn better, hopefully build trust, and then find ways to forge new partnerships. Some content in the consensus document, feel free to look it up online. But essentially, we're looking at defense in depth for AI safety, both in terms of evaluation and assessment, as well as developing AI safely, and then mitigation and control. So that's one area. Singapore Consensus to identify priorities. It's hopefully a rallying document to drive further research collaboration globally. There are also other ways in which we could work together in research. This is work that we have done in the International Network of AI Safety Institutes. Singapore lead the work in AI testing, conducted some joint testing exercises over the past 8 months. The latest one was discussed last week in Vancouver, where the network met to sort of share the work that we've been doing around joint testing as well as other areas. I think when we think about joint testing, it may not look very sophisticated. I think I'll be the first one to say that. But it is useful way to start collaborating amongst safety institutes as a way to eventually start looking at some common practices, building capacity, developing and extending evaluation methodologies. I think what was also useful from the experience, as I've learned, is meeting each other, well, one another, every fortnight virtually was very helpful in, well, learning about each other and building trust. That's again the foundation in which you then start to look at more areas where you could cooperate around AI safety research. Other research areas in terms of our region would be, we conducted an exercise where we brought together research institutions from 9 other countries, China included, to do red teaming around languages and culture. The idea was to start thinking about how we could collectively develop a taxonomy in thinking about linguistic and cultural bias, and how then do we do automated testing eventually, moving from red teaming to automated testing. And the next bound is looking at building benchmarks with the data, as well as, can we organize the next round with more countries. Moving from research into industry, beyond just frontier models, we are also quite keen to see how we can collaborate in the area of applications, right? This is where it touches consumers, businesses much more directly. And we're doing it in 3 ways for cooperation, I guess. In 3 ways. One is in bringing enterprises together with third-party testers, as well as regulators, and this is a global effort, it's not just in Singapore, to identify how to test, what to test for specific use cases. This is a new practice, right? A lot of the literature that you read out there around testing, evaluation for AI is very much on the models. So how do we think about doing it at the application layer? We're all learning together, so that's the first step. How do we understand what risk to test for and how to go about doing this, given that many of these issues are very use case specific. We have started a pilot that we launched in Paris in February at the summit that Anne just spoke about. And we've got some useful learning, 17 use cases from more 30 countries from around the world. Please go to the AI Verify Foundation website. You can get more information on these use cases. And then taking this information from these very specific use cases, we generalize them into a testing starter kit for testing LLM applications that could be relevant for all enterprises deploying LLM apps, right? So we learned from the sandbox, we put it into some guidelines and best practices, addressing issues around reliability, security, undesirable content, hallucination, and so on, providing some baseline tests that we think will be helpful, but also recognizing that most of these, there's no such thing as a universal test, even for hallucination, because it's very use case context specific, then to also recommend some methodologies around how you would think about testing. For example, don't just look at output, go into components, some methodologies for red teaming, methodologies for getting your data set together, thinking about metrics, and ways to do evaluation, or evaluators, or build evaluators. And speaking of building evaluators, then taking the content from the start kit, we then built the tools to support enterprises in actually running these tests, and that's where the technical tools in the AI Verify toolkit comes in handy. So all of the work that we do, whether it's in regional safety testing, in frontier model testing with the network, or with enterprises through the assurance sandbox and the starter kit, is how we're leading up towards pre-standardization work, as well as eventually standards. And those standards move slowly, as we've already discussed today, but we've already got, in about 6 months, got a work item approved in ISO SC42 on Gen AI testing methodologies. And hopefully this will help provide some useful guidance to organizations thinking of testing. And beyond principles, going to more practical, well, principles meaning ethical principles, We also want to think about how we can get into more practical testing around processes. And we know that, I just spoke about this morning, it's difficult to have one framework to rule them all. You see a bunch of frameworks here on screen, from the US NIST AI RMF to various frameworks in ISO, such as the 42001, and then G7 has something as well. How then do we make sure that we drive interoperability? And that's where the AI Verify Foundation testing framework comes in. It's a set of process checks, not technical tests. It's already aligned with these various frameworks. It interoperates with them and allows companies like MSD or Zopa, that the examples on screen here, to align internationally once they use AI Verify testing. So these are ways in which we can try and globally find interoperability, globally cooperate around frameworks that are somewhat diverse. And of course, developing norms, we're also thinking of how we can do that in our region, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, that's ASEAN, comprises 10 Southeast Asian countries, and Singapore chairs the work group for AI, and we're trying to drive regional harmonization through common guidelines and eventually build tools to support ASEAN safe and responsible AI development. Finally, in the area of developing standards and norms, I think it's important to bring organizations together. Of course, you have your SDOs, but at the same time, I think before you get to the SDOs, I think it's useful to share good practices, build tools, and start to learn and cooperate more with one another. And the AI Verify Foundation is one mechanism that we have set up in order to do that. And with that, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Lee.